Welcome everyone to this Masterclass Explainer. I'm your professor today, and I gotta tell you, I am absolutely thrilled to embark on this journey with you into the very architecture of the English language. Now, as students of English as a foreign language, you've probably noticed that English pronunciation can sometimes feel like a wild, untamed beast. Well, today, we're gonna tame it together. We're going to completely demystify the core building blocks of spoken English by digging into the science of the syllable. So let's start with a little experiment. If I ask you to count the syllables in a sentence, how do you actually do it? I bet a lot of you might instinctively tap your fingers on the desk for each beat. You just feel the rhythm, right? But here's the funny thing. If I recorded a group of native English speakers and asked them to count the syllables in a super fast-paced sentence, there'd actually be a ton of disagreement. And that's because while we all intuitively feel the rhythm of speech, language scientists have a much stricter building code for what truly makes a syllable. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to cover 1. Defining the syllable. 2. Structure of the syllable. 3. Initial consonant clusters. 4. Final consonant clusters. 5. Rules of syllable division. And finally, 6. Improving your pronunciation. All right, part 1, defining the syllable. The blueprint. Okay, let's dive right into this blueprint. To truly master English pronunciation, we have to look at the syllable from two totally different angles, the physical and the structural. Phonetically, we're talking about physical airflow. The center of a syllable is usually a loud, clear vowel where the air flows freely, surrounded by consonants that obstruct that air. But phonologically, that's where we get into phonotactics. This is the study of the possible phoneme combinations in a language. Think of phonotactics as the strict building code of English. Just because your mouth can physically make a certain combination of sounds doesn't mean the English language actually allows it to exist. We can actually map out a syllable, kind of like an adorable little family tree. Modern phonology splits the syllable into two main branches, the onset and the rhyme. The onset is just the consonant or consonants at the very beginning. The rhyme, which, yes, is literally the part that matches when we write rhyming poetry, is divided into the peak, which is normally your central vowel, and the coda, which are the consonants at the end. The absolutely crucial thing to remember here, only the peak is strictly required. You can have an onset, a coda, both, or neither. Moving right along to part 2, structure of the syllable, the construction. With our blueprint in hand, let's put on our hard hats, head to the construction site, and see how English actually assembles these sounds piece by piece. The sheer extremes of English phonotactics are wild. On one end of the spectrum, we have the minimum syllable, a single vowel in isolation. Think of words like are or or. We call this a zero onset and zero coda. It's literally just the peak. But then, on the exact opposite end, you have a word like twelfths. Yes, that whole massive thing is one single syllable. For many of you, your native language might prefer a nice, clean consonant-vowel rhythm. English, however, absolutely loves to stack consonants together into these massive clusters. Which brings us to part 3, initial consonant clusters, the front porch. Let's examine the very front of the word first. Think of initial clusters as the front porch of our syllable. In English, when you begin speaking after a pause, a word can start with a vowel, or 1, 2, or even 3 consonants piled up together. Now, when English builds a 3-consonant cluster at the start of a word, it is not random. It follows an incredibly strict rule. The pre-initial consonant is always S, period. It's then followed by an initial P, T, or K. And finally, a post-initial L, R, W, or J. Take words like split, stream, or square. I invite you, right now, wherever you are, to practice saying these out loud. Split, stream, square. You can practically feel how that S locks together with the following sounds in your vocal tract. Next up, part 4, final consonant clusters, the back extension. Let's see what happens when we look at the ends of words. If the front porch held 3 consonants, the back extension of an English syllable can hold a staggering 4 consonants. Let's carefully unpack this monster of a word we mentioned earlier, twelfths. Looking at the coda, we have the pre-final consonant L, the final consonant F, post-final 1 is TH, and post-final 2 is S. L, F, T, S. 4 consonants stacked together like heavy building blocks. Or think about the word prompts, M, P, T, S. A quick pronunciation pro tip for you here. When you have plosives packed together like the P and T in prompts, the release of the first plosive is practically inaudible. You don't overpronounce it as promptees, you just glide them together. Part 5, Rules of Syllable Division, the collision. So now we have to shift our focus from individual words in isolation to the messy, dynamic reality of normal speech. What happens when these heavily built syllables literally crash into each other? Well, I present to you the mystery of the word extra. Most English speakers agree it definitely has 2 syllables. But where exactly is the boundary? Which division feels correct to your ears? Is it extra, 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 or extra? It's kind of a brain teaser, isn't it? To solve this mystery, phonologists use something called the maximal onsets principle. This rule basically says we should push as many consonants as possible over to the right-hand syllable. So following that logic, your first instinct might be to push all of them to the right, giving us E on one side and extra on the other. But wait, the final step says we must check if that new onset is actually legal. And as we literally just learned, no English word can begin with k, st, The absolute maximum is 3 consonants starting with S. So, since k, st, is illegal, we have to back up. We assign the k to the left side, leaving stir on the right. And since stir is a perfectly legal English onset, like in the word stream, the true scientific division is extra. But, English wouldn't be English without a quirky little exception. What about the word better? The maximal onsets principle tells us to push the T to the right, which would give us be-ta. But phonotactics steps in again. In English, isolated syllables cannot end with short vowels like the E in be. They absolutely demand a consonant to close them off. So we actually divide it as beta. In fact, some phonologists solve this by saying that middle T is ambisyllabic, meaning it physically belongs to both syllables at exactly the same time. How cool is that? And finally, part 6, improving your pronunciation. Let's bring all of this rich phonetic theory back to practical reality. How does knowing this blueprint help you out there in the real world? First, I want to reassure you by sharing a direct quote from our teaching notes. English has a more complex syllable structure than most languages. Look, if you find yourself stumbling over words like twelfths or texts, it is absolutely not your fault. The architectural rules of English are genuinely demanding. Your native language might simply not allow these heavy, crashing combinations of sounds. And just validating that difficulty, that's the first step to overcoming it. So the crucial takeaway here is that you can use this blueprint to your advantage. Here are your actionable tips. First, recognize your own native language's limits. Notice when your brain tries to sneak extra vowels into English words just to break up those heavy clusters. Second, when you hit a difficult word, literally map it out. Build that syllable tree in your head. Third, practice those massive clusters slowly. Isolate the sounds piece by piece before you speed up. And lastly, pay very close attention to word endings. That's where English loves to quietly pile up 3 or 4 consonants that carry super important grammatical meaning, like plurals and past tense. All right, I'm going to leave you with a bit of a challenge today. Take these new structural blueprinting skills and try independently analyzing a complex word. Try building the syllable tree for the word cramped or the word texts. Can you find the pre-final consonant? What about the post-final consonants? Because by decoding these hidden structures, you're not just memorizing random sounds anymore. You are mastering the actual architecture of English itself. Thank you so much for joining me in this masterclass explainer, and happy practicing.